As a generalized rule, I think people tend to see themselves as kind of the exception to rules in statistics. I've noticed this in a number of different circumstances. People believe that something is like wildly unlikely or wildly likely without taking into account all of the variables. I kind of have a rule for myself when I'm looking at statistics that essentially goes, assume that you are average or slightly less favorable unless you have evidence and data that says otherwise that can clearly be factored into the equation. Yep. And then you can begin to factor that in. So like if there are variables that I can factor in, I try and do that to get a better picture of things to be able to act accordingly. But that being said, there are obviously a number of instances where we have additional data and we don't want to factor it into the equation as well. I've been thinking and kind of noticing how people see themselves as the exception for a while, but the solidification and kind of expression of that idea, I think, was assisted by a humorous and pretty blunt movie that actually happened to be a rom-com of all things called He's Just Not That Into You.
Oh, great movie. Great movie.
Yeah. I think it's pretty funny. As rom-coms go, it's a pretty
I'm not a
solid one.
Romance movie person.
Yeah, me neither.
That is a great movie.
I think it's great because it's humorous, but also representative of reality, and you don't have to suspend too much disbelief. I think that makes it really great.
So how does that relate to the stats thing?
Sure. So there's one scene in particular where a male character, Alex, is listening to a female character named Gigi talk about her date with a third-party guy who didn't call her back. And she hypothesizes a number of different reasons for this, ranging from the guy losing her number to him even getting hit by a cab. And Alex retorts with the most likely scenario that, put simply, the guy just didn't want to see her again.
He's just not that into you.
Yeah, as kind of the movie name. And Gigi's really taken aback by this and retorts by describing a friend in a similar situation that did end up marrying the guy that didn't call back. And Alex kind of concludes by saying that the friend was an exception and that it's dumb to believe in that and put stock in the exception. One should recognize what the rule is. In this particular case, he's saying that if a guy doesn't call you, it's because he doesn't want to call you. And we should apply this to ourselves. Alex is suggesting that we recognize what the rule is and not expect to be that exception.
Right, because realistically, you probably aren't the exception to the rule.
And true to that, the movie kind of poetically follows a number of people, and only maybe 1 in a dozen ends up as the kind of quote-unquote exception to a given lesson or rule. All of the other people follow the exact rule, and what you would think should happen, given all of the evidence and variables that you see leading up, is exactly what happens.
What happens most often.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's part of what, that's kind of what I was talking about earlier, where I think the movie's representative of reality.
Yeah.
I think, we kind of have to apply that same logic to statistics, like in the absence of additional data that can be factored in, we should just assume that we're average, or as Alex kind of says, we're the rule, not the exception.
Mm-hmm.
I think initially people hear something like that and they'll think it's kind of depressing seeming, especially since a lot of statistics can spell kind of doom and gloom for us. But at the same time, like you said, it can be really freeing. I think it can help you kind of lower your expectations. If you expect to be, like the captain of the football team and the coolest guy in school, you're going to be let down when you barely make varsity and have some friends. But if you recognize that the average person isn't on varsity at all, you'll be ecstatic when you make it rather than disappointed as you would have in the first circumstance, right?
Well, yeah, that's kind of like the rule with placing gold, silver, bronze, right? Have you heard
yeah.
this?
Yeah.
The happiest person is actually the one who places bronze. That's what people say. Because those people sit here and they go,
they're grateful just to be there.
I was almost not even here.
Yeah.
Versus, for example, the people who place silver are like, I was almost first place.
Almost there, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure that varies if the gap between first and second is massive, right? If there's some blowout like Shaun White on the half pipe or Michael Phelps in some of those races, but yeah.
Seen some of Michael Phelps races?
Okay,
there was
the
classic
one
that's like a tenth of a second or something.
I thought it was
Hundredth?
a one
hundredth
of a second
like
if you
that,
won
yeah.
by, yeah. That's crazy, but
yeah.
yeah. I think the other thing that looking at statistics like that can do, how it can kind of free you, is it allows you to take action. You know, once you've accepted that maybe some negative statistic applies to you, you can try and take action to better things for yourself. You know, it can actually result in increased likelihood of good things or decreased likelihood in bad things if you're able to take some kind of positive action on something. So instead of just sitting by the wayside helplessly thinking that you're doomed or you're totally fine, you can actually look at things and increase your chances of whatever you want to have happen.